Welcome to WealthRise Stories, where clarity meets knowledge, and knowledge becomes financial power.
I can hire one half of the working class to kill the other half. Creepy, isn't it? A chilling line, cold, powerful, and just a little ruthless. It's a philosophy, or at least a famous quote attributed to Jay Gould, a name that has largely faded into obscurity for most people today, yet once embodied a national nightmare, a living symbol of unbridled greed in 19th century America. From a portrait of Jay Gould to illustrations of his immense wealth. Lavish yachts gliding over calm waters, opulent mansions in Gothic revival or Victorian style. Him sitting in a luxurious office with a mahogany desk. Piles of money, endless trains bearing his company's name, cutting across vast plains. Imagine a man, not a king. Not a military general, not even a great scientist, yet holding enough wealth in his hands to buy entire empires outright. He owned the most extravagant yachts, ever launched the grandest mansions in the priciest corners of the country, and fleets of trains carrying his name that crisscrossed America from east to west, north to south. Millions of dollars poured into his pockets every single day. Building a financial empire few could rival, an empire spanning railroads, telegraphs, and even the stock exchanges themselves. He was, in a way, the living embodiment of the American dream. Just not the version anyone wants to celebrate. But at the same time, imagine that very same man being branded public enemy number one, the demon of Wall Street, the embodiment of greed, immorality, and manipulation. His name screamed across the most sensational headlines, splashed on the front pages of every major newspaper, followed by the curses of an enraged public. Every political cartoon painted him as a demonic face, a giant blood-sucking spider draining the people dry, or a sly old fox gnawing away at the economy. Effigies of him were burned in the streets. His name was cursed from offices to church pews. The hatred for Jay Gould was real profound and shockingly widespread. It wasn't mere envy. It was a visceral reaction to a force people felt they simply couldn't control. So the big question, the one that haunted me the first time I dug into his story, is this: how did a small, frail, sickly man, born into a poor farming family in rural New York with no status, no connections, no early advantages, manage to upend the entire American economy? How did he trigger nationwide financial crises? Most famously the 1869 Black Friday, when his manipulation of the gold market nearly brought the U.S. economy crashing down. How did he come to control almost the entire transportation and telegraph systems and become the most hated man in the country? Was he truly just a greedy, amoral villain, as the press portrayed him? A textbook robber baron, nothing more, nothing less? Or is there another side, something history accidentally overlooked or deliberately buried? Was Jay Gould actually a kind of wizard of Wall Street, a man with astonishing foresight, a financial strategist of rare genius, someone who glimpsed the future of the modern economy long before his contemporaries, but who ended up cast as the devil because of the ruthlessness, cold calculation, and utter disregard for norms with which he pursued his goals? In this video drawing from the book, The Wizard of Wall Street and His Wealth, or The Life and Deeds of Jay Gould, we won't just walk through Gould's financial achievements or his notorious scandals. Our aim is to dig deeper into his turbulent, contradictory life and attempt to humanize him. That doesn't mean excusing his controversial actions. It means peeling back the layers the public and history have wrapped around him, trying to understand the true motivations behind his earth-shaking decisions. We're going to look at Jay Gould not only through the lens of hatred or admiration, but as a human being, a product of the harsh, opportunity-ridden Gilded Age. A man with burning ambition, hidden fears, cold calculations, and moments of loneliness as he stood against the world. Was he a misunderstood genius or a malicious intellect harnessed for darker purposes? Was Jay Gould the inevitable product of an era when capitalism exploded without restraint, where the line between morality and profit blurred to near invisibility? Or was he an extraordinary individual, sharper and bolder than his peers, relentlessly pursuing what he believed was right, regardless of the consequences or the backlash? Join me as we explore the life of Jay Gould, not just a notorious robber baron, but a man full of complexities, contradictions, and mysteries. Together, we'll uncover whether he was in the end a wizard or a devil. And perhaps after all this, what we might learn from the man who reshaped American finance. Jay Gould. Hearing that name, you might instantly picture something in your mind: a ruthless robber baron, a greedy titan of industry, a cold-blooded market manipulator, and perhaps one of the ultimate villains in the history of American business. He is an icon, a mirror reflecting the shadows of the darkest corners of the Gilded Age, a time when wealth and power were amassed at staggering speed, often accompanied by schemes, brutal battles, and merciless competition. And today, we're going to dive deep into the life of this controversial figure through a fascinating book, sometimes even a bit satirical, yet incredibly insightful: The Wizard of Wall Street and His Wealth, or The Life and Deeds of Jay Gould. With a title that long, you can probably tell this isn't one of those self-help or get-rich-quick books, right? This book was written by Henry Clews, a contemporary of Gould's, a well-known stockbroker, and a sharp observer of Wall Street at the time. Clews first published it in 1887, while Gould was still at the peak of his power and influence. That means this isn't a biography written long after the dust had settled. It's a direct, raw perspective filled with the thoughts and judgments of someone who lived through Gould's era. Clews didn't write this book just to recount Gould's story. He wrote it to analyze, dissect, and lay bare the mechanisms, the tactics, and the impacts that men like Gould had on America's economy and society. He makes no attempt to hide his opinions very much shaped by his era, painting Jay Gould as a perplexing figure, a wizard who bent the market to his will. But here's the most important point I want you to keep in mind as we begin this journey. We are not here to judge Gould solely through the lens of the typical robber baron narrative or one-sided rumors. No, we're going to try to understand him. To understand a man who rose from nothing armed with a mind sharp enough to cut glass and a willpower as unshakable as steel. Jay Gould wasn't just an individual. He was a reflection, an archetypal product of the Gilded Age, an era of explosive industrial growth, golden opportunities, and also an era marked by enormous inequality, vicious power struggles, and moral boundaries blurred beyond recognition. By examining Jay Gould's life and career, we won't just see a brilliant businessman or a ruthless operator. We'll see the darkest corners and the most blazing ambitions of human nature. Timeless lessons about boundless ambition, about how absolute power can corrupt a person to unfathomable depths, and about the price morality pays in the race to the top. These lessons remain painfully relevant, perhaps even more than ever, in today's world of business and finance. Our journey will take us through every pivotal stage of Jay Gould's life, from his humble beginnings as a farm boy in New York, through his years as a fur trader, then a railroad builder, and ultimately, the Wizard of Wall Street, the man who pulled the invisible strings of financial power. We'll explore his legendary deals, his brutal battles, his brilliant strategies, and his catastrophic missteps. And more importantly, we'll connect these stories to the social and political landscape of the time to see how one individual could shape and be shaped by the era he lived in. This isn't just a dry history lesson. This is an adventure into the mind of one of the most complex figures in business history. I invite you, everyone watching, to peel back the layers with me, to go beyond first impressions and truly understand the man named Jay Gould. Let's uncover whether he was truly just a straightforward robber baron, or a misunderstood genius, a ruthless pioneer, or perhaps even a cautionary tale for all of us today. Prepare yourself, because Jay Gould's story is anything but simple. We'll begin in the next section with the earliest years of his life, the place where everything began to shape the Wizard of Wall Street. Translate this paragraph into English, keeping the tone, rhythm, and word choice of an American speaker. Break lines exactly where needed. Follow the original paragraph structure and do not arbitrarily split sentences in a way that disrupts the flow. Meaning the layout must remain exactly like the original. Hello everyone, my fellow companions on this journey, to explore the great stories and the figures who have shaped the world we live in today. I've always been fascinated by complex individuals, by legends, whose names can evoke both admiration and fear. And today, we begin such an adventure traveling back in time to trace the origins of one of the most controversial yet undeniably influential figures in the history of Wall Street in America, Jay Gould. The name, Jay Gould, it conjures up the image of a robber baron, an immoral capitalist tycoon, a market manipulator, a wizard of Wall Street. But who exactly was Jay Gould before he became the towering shadow looming over an entire era? What forged the sharp intellect, the iron will, and the relentless ambition that defined him? To answer that, we must rewind the clock to the turbulent 19th century, to a remote rural town in New York, where the first seeds of ambition were planted. This is Chapter 1, The Seeds of Ambition. Jay Gould was born in 1836 in Roxbury, a small town in the Catskill Mountains of New York. At first glance, young Gould hardly fit the image of the idealized hero of his time. He wasn't a strong farm boy with calloused hands, nor a vibrant hunter full of energy. Jay was born small, frail, pale, and frequently ill. His weak constitution placed him at a disadvantage from the start in a society that valued physical strength and endurance. His father, John Burr Gould, was a farmer working an unproductive piece of land. The family lived in constant hardship, where having enough to eat was already a major effort. Jay was the seventh of 8 children, and his childhood, to put it poetically, was a chain of deprivation. To me, this is incredibly interesting. Imagine a sickly child in a world where survival depended heavily on physical strength and manual labor. The invisible pressure must have been immense. It could crush someone, or on the contrary, push them to seek another path, another weapon for survival and advancement. For Jay Gould, that weapon was his mind, his extraordinary intellect. While other children ran across the fields or helped their parents with farm chores, Gould buried himself in books and old maps. The village school didn't offer much. He attended only a few years before leaving to work. But Gould's thirst for knowledge never stopped. He taught himself, researched anything he could get his hands on. This wasn't the idle curiosity of a child, it was a focused hunger for knowledge, an instinct for tracking down information. Gould had a natural talent for mathematics, geometry, and especially geography. Numbers and lines on a map weren't just lifeless symbols to him. They were tools, keys to decoding the world, to understanding structure, potential, and pathways. He could spend hours redrawing maps, calculating areas, or sketching out new transportation routes. It reminds me of a chess player who doesn't just see the pieces, but sees the whole board, the hidden moves, and the intricate connections. It wasn't long before this talent led Gould to his first jobs. At age 15, he began working as a surveyor, measuring land for a local company. Later, he was hired by a map maker, where he had the chance to fully develop his abilities. Think about it, a skinny teenager with a mind capable of visualizing and recreating entire landscapes. That was a quiet power, a different kind of strength. These early jobs not only gave him income, but became his first real-world classroom. He learned how to observe, analyze, and notice what others overlooked. More importantly, he learned to see the world through numbers and strategy. These early jobs soon led him into his first business ventures. One of the most notable was his entry into the leather tanning industry. In his early 20s, Gould persuaded a wealthy leather merchant, Zadok Pratt or Charles Loop, depending on the source, but the key point is a much older, experienced partner to invest in a tannery in Pennsylvania. Gould was given the task of managing it with very little capital of his own. And this is where we begin to see the other seeds of ambition, sprouting seeds not always pleasant. Gould proved to be a talented manager. The tannery grew quickly, but he didn't stop at managing. He learned every corner of the business, from raw materials to finished products, from supply chains to markets. He worked nonstop, barely slept, immersed in calculations and planning. Then conflict erupted. With skill and a bit of cunning, Gould maneuvered to push out his older partners and seize full control of the tannery. He bought out their shares at low prices, sometimes taking advantage of their ignorance or complacency. The details of these deceptions vary across accounts, but the core message is clear. Gould displayed a frightening level of ruthlessness and decisiveness. He had no hesitation about using any tactic necessary to achieve his goals, even if it meant betraying the trust of those who had helped him. This was a harsh lesson for Gould, and a very early glimpse into his true nature. Business is a battlefield with no room for softness or sentiment. Trust can be bought, exploited, or broken, and deception, if executed skillfully, can become a decisive advantage. For Gould, this wasn't a moral dilemma. It was the brutal reality of the game. He didn't invent deception, but he mastered it quickly and effectively. So what drove a frail young man from a small town to become a shrewd fox so early in his career? I believe the answer lies in the final, most important point of this chapter: the desire to escape poverty. The fear of returning to the hardship and deprivation he experienced as a child became his greatest motivation, the blazing fire that never went out in Jay Gould's mind. He had witnessed the harshness of farm life, the fragility of existence when everything depended on nature and unpredictable harvests. He had felt the sting of scarcity, the smallness of being a weak child in a vast world. This fear wasn't just a desire for comfort, it was a primal survival instinct. It was the craving for security, for control, and above all, for the power to never again depend on anyone else. For Gould, money wasn't merely a means to luxury. It was armor, a weapon, a fortress protecting him from danger and uncertainty. This ambition burned so intensely it could justify any action, any tactic, as long as it led to the final goal: independence and power. Have you ever wondered, if someone were born into wealth, would they ever develop such ruthless determination? Or is it precisely from deprivation, from early insecurities, that the wizards of the world are truly forged? I think for Gould, hardship wasn't a burden. It was the furnace that hardened his will. So in Chapter 1, The Seeds of Ambition, we have seen a young Jay Gould with a frail body but an unusually sharp mind. We've watched him teach himself, hone his skills, and apply them quickly in the real world. We've seen him learn his first lessons about the brutality of business, about the art of deception and manipulation. And above all, we've come to understand that behind all of this was a burning, almost terrifying desire to escape poverty, to seize power, and to ensure that no one would ever again control his fate. These seeds, though small and sometimes thorny, had been planted. And we know they would not merely sprout, they would grow into a towering giant whose branches stretched across an entire era, sparking financial storms and leaving behind a deeply controversial legacy that persists to this day. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Jay Gould left his small hometown to step onto a larger stage where the real battles would begin. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming chapters of this fascinating journey. See you next time. Welcome back to the channel. I'm your storyteller. And today we continue our journey into the life of one of the most controversial figures in American financial history, Jay Gould. Last week we explored his humble origins, his innate intelligence, and the first steps of a young man brimming with ambition, from a map surveyor to a tannery owner, to the moment he realized that this world had far more to offer than land and leather. There was another place, a bigger, louder playground, and one that, frankly, had fewer rules. And that brings us to today's Chapter 2, with a title that couldn't be more fitting: Stepping into Wall Street. Join me as we travel back in time, returning to New York in the mid-19th century, to witness how a determined man began his quest to conquer the financial world one step at a time. Picture this. You're standing in New York City sometime around the 1850s or 1860s. Forget the gleaming glass skyscrapers and flashing electronic tickers we know today. Wall Street back then felt like a massive, chaotic fish market that smelled of money. It was a maze of uneven cobblestone streets, cramped little offices reeking of old paper ink, and a hint of anxious sweat blending with sheer excitement. Flickering gas lamps cast shaky light on tense, ambitious faces. The shouting of brokers, the clacking of telegraph machines firing off lightning-fast updates, everything melded into a symphony of madness and opportunity. This was not a tightly regulated environment like today. There was no Securities and Exchange Commission overseeing every action. Honestly, there might not have even been many written rules at all. Wall Street back then was a wild frontier, a second gold rush. But the gold wasn't underground. They was in the stock certificates, the deals, and most importantly, in the flow of information. It was a battleground where the strongest, smartest, and coldest players survived. This was where titans like Cornelius Vanderbilt first shaped their empires, where names that would later become legends learned how to hunt. And it was here that Jay Gould, an outsider, with no family backing and no inherited network, was about to take his very first step. So how did Jay Gould break into this world? Certainly not by strolling into a lavish party and shaking hands with powerful financiers. No, that wasn't Gould's style. He arrived in New York with some money saved from his earlier ventures' profits from selling the tannery and small land deals. But more important than money, he brought something many others lacked: sharp vision, razor-like analytical instincts, and an iron will that refused to break. Gould's first deal on Wall Street wasn't a loud explosion. It was a calculated move. He often targeted small railroad companies struggling financially or teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. Why railroads? Because Gould's background in mapping and surveying gave him a deep understanding of geography and land potential. He had a unique perspective that desk-bound investors in New York might not have had. Take this example: a railroad company drowning in debt, its stock price collapsing. Everyone else saw a risky investment not worth touching, but Gould saw something different. He might have noticed that the railroad's route sat in a strategic position. Maybe a major line would someday pass through the area. Maybe a new coal mine would soon be discovered nearby. Maybe a small settlement was on the verge of becoming a booming town. Here lies the key idea: information was gold, and Gould was a master gold miner. He would meticulously gather every bit of information possible: messy financial reports, whispered hallway rumors, and even details he observed firsthand through his field experience. With all that knowledge, Gould would quietly scoop up the company's stock while it was still dirt cheap. And when the time came, when the market finally recognized the potential he had already seen, the stock would soar and Gould would pocket massive profits. It was one of the first big lessons he learned. Early true value is often hidden, and the winner is the one who can see through the fog. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Wall Street didn't operate solely under written rules about buying and selling shares or gathering information. It had its own shadow rules, unspoken strategies everyone understood, yet no one admitted to using. And Jay Gould. He learned these rules quickly and even elevated them to an entirely different level. The most important lesson Gould absorbed, and one that became a defining mark of his career, was controlling stock and manipulating markets. He realized that making money wasn't just about buying stock and waiting for it to rise. If you bought enough stock, you could control the entire company. You could change its board, make strategic decisions, or even dissolve the business if that served your interests. And when you controlled a significant chunk of the shares, or even managed to corner most of the outstanding stock, you could do even more. You could manipulate the price. By continuously buying to create artificial demand or strategically spreading favorable or unfavorable rumors, Gould could push stock prices up or down at will. He could trigger a short squeeze, forcing short sellers to buy back stock at outrageous prices, driving them into ruin. This was a brutal, unforgiving game. It wasn't meant for the faint of heart or for those clinging to traditional business ethics. Wall Street in Gould's era was an arena, and every investor was a gladiator. Gould had no hesitation using every tactic, every trick, as long as it led to victory. For him, the end always justified the means. These early experiences shaped Jay Gould's investment style: cold, ruthless, uncompromising. He wasn't a builder in the traditional sense. He didn't construct factories or invent new technologies. Gould was a Wall Street chess grandmaster, always several moves ahead, always scanning the board for weaknesses to exploit. He became known for never letting emotion influence his decisions. Companies to Gould weren't communities of workers or proud institutions. They were numbers on paper, assets to be bought, broken apart, or restructured for maximum profit. He didn't care about employee loyalty, public reputation, or legacy in the traditional sense. The only thing that mattered was the flow of money into his pocket and into those of his investors. This style made him a hated, despised figure to many, but also respected and feared by many others. He didn't play by other people's rules. He created his own, or exploited every loophole in the system. The lack of regulation at the time made Wall Street the perfect environment for someone like Gould to thrive. He wasn't simply a villain. He was a product of his era, a genius at exploiting opportunities others were too timid to seize. And once Gould mastered these shadow rules, once he understood that Wall Street was no place for the weak or naive, he was ready for bigger battles, historic deals that would shake the entire American economy. And so Jay Gould officially stepped into the brutal financial world of New York. He learned to read the market, to wield information as a weapon, and to bend the rules to his advantage. This was only the beginning, the opening chapter of a career that would be both legendary and infamous. In the next chapter, we'll dive into Gould's real battles, the fiery confrontations with other titans of the era, and how he used his brilliance and cunning to build a financial empire no one could have predicted. I hope you're ready for a dramatic ride, because today we're stepping into one of the most legendary showdowns in American financial history. This wasn't just a battle of money, it was a clash of minds, a life and death chess match between two giants that would redefine how corporations operated and how laws were bent and manipulated. We're now in Chapter 3, the Erie Railroad War, and the story of Jay Gould, a genius, a monster, depending on how you choose to see him. Imagine a world where railroads weren't just transportation routes, but the lifeblood of an entire nation. In the early 19th century, especially after the Civil War, the United States was exploding with growth. Cities were booming, massive natural resources needed extracting and shipping, and to make all of that possible, you needed railroads. These iron monsters roared across the tracks linking the East Coast to the West, carrying goods, people, and the dreams of a rising economic empire. Owning a railroad wasn't just owning a transportation company. It meant political power, market control, and staggering wealth. And where there's power and money, fierce competition becomes inevitable. The railroad industry was a true battleground. No rules, no ethics. The tycoons of the era were willing to do anything to crush their rivals, from brutal price cutting to sabotage, and sometimes even dirtier tactics. It was a big fish eats little fish era in the most literal sense, except sometimes the little fish had sharper teeth. On one side of the battlefield was Cornelius Vanderbilt, famously known as the Commodore, a man who started with ferry boats as a young boy, built a massive shipping empire, and then shifted into railroads. At age 70, Vanderbilt was a monument, a symbol of wealth and power. He believed in the force of finance, in buying and controlling everything he wanted. He wanted the New York Central Railroad, and he got it. Next, his eyes turned to another target, the Erie Railroad. The Erie wasn't the best line, nor the most profitable, but it was a thorn in the side of the New York Central, especially in hauling goods from the West into New York City. Vanderbilt wanted the Erie gone, and his method was always simple: buy the stock, seize the board, and swallow the company. A straightforward, powerful, and usually effective strategy. But there was a problem standing in his way. Were three formidable names. Daniel Drew, an old warhorse of finance known for ambushing stocks. James Fisk, a flamboyant showman of Wall Street with lightning-fast instincts. And finally, Jay Gould, the man. We're studying the brain, the quiet strategist behind the boldest schemes. Drew, Fisk, and Gould all had stakes and interests in the Erie Railroad, and they had absolutely no intention of selling to Vanderbilt. Instead, they saw an opportunity not just to resist the Commodore, but to extract money straight from his pockets. And so the Erie Railroad War began. Vanderbilt started buying Erie stock on the open market, driving the price up. He believed that with his immense fortune, he could simply buy enough shares to secure control. That was his signature tactic. But he hadn't anticipated the cunning of Drew, Fisk, and Gould. What Jay Gould realized was this: Vanderbilt was playing by an old rule book, while Gould was perfectly willing to rewrite the rules in the middle of the match. As Vanderbilt kept buying, Gould and his partners pulled off a classic but audacious and wildly controversial move. They began printing new shares. Not counterfeits, but converting the company's debts in the form of convertible bonds into common stock in massive amounts. Picture Vanderbilt trying to buy every apple in the market, only for his enemies to suddenly roll out thousands upon thousands of brand new apples that never existed before. The number of Erie shares skyrocketed in just a few days, diluting everything Vanderbilt had already bought. The stock price tanked, and Vanderbilt found himself holding piles of devalued shares without gaining control. He'd been spectacularly cornered. Vanderbilt was furious, absolutely livid. He sued, accusing Gould and his associates of fraud. And indeed, a New York judge issued an arrest warrant for them and ordered them to return the profits. But Jay Gould was not someone who bowed easily. In a scene straight out of a Hollywood heist film, Jay Gould, James Fisk, and Daniel Drew, carrying a suitcase stuffed with cash, some say nearly $6 million, an astronomical amount at the time, fled New York City, crossed the Hudson River, and took refuge in Jersey City, New Jersey. Why New Jersey? Because New Jersey was a different state with a different legal system. New York's arrest warrants meant nothing there. From their New Jersey fortress, Gould and Fisk continued running the Erie Railroad. And more importantly, they launched a new war, a political one. They used the mountain of cash they carried to bribe New York, politicians, legislators, judges, even the governor. They bought loyalty, ensuring lawyers would defend them, judges would rule in their favor, and lawmakers would pass legislation protecting their interests. Bribery at the time was an open art form barely hidden at all. Gould and Fisk freely spent money to change the game. They understood that if the law stood on their side, then no matter how unethical their actions were, they became legal. Vanderbilt, though the richest man in America, was now playing in an arena he didn't understand. He believed in the law, in the power of money to buy justice. But Gould showed him that money could buy not just justice, it could buy the people who made the justice. Finally, after months of tension, a settlement was arranged. A tired and frustrated Vanderbilt agreed to pay Gould and Fisk nearly $5 million to buy back the Erie shares they had created, and an additional sum to get them to step away from the Erie leadership. It was a massive ransom, a humiliating concession for the Commodore. So what's the true significance of Jay Gould's victory? The key point is, this Gould didn't win with financial strength. He wasn't richer than Vanderbilt. He didn't have an empire like Vanderbilt's. He won with intelligence, audacity, and an uncanny ability to spot loopholes in the system and exploit them to the fullest. He used tools that Vanderbilt, with the rigidity of a man long accustomed to winning, never thought of or never dared to use. Vanderbilt embodied old money traditional power control through tangible assets and cash. Gould represented a new breed of tycoon, those who understood that real power lay in manipulating markets, manipulating laws, and even manipulating public opinion. This was a brutal lesson for Vanderbilt and a warning sign for the entire American economy. The Erie Wars showed that a battle of unequal strength didn't guarantee the weaker side would lose. What mattered was who could change the rules, who could see the cracks others overlooked. Gould's victory in the Erie War wasn't just personal. It was a watershed moment that reshaped how major corporations would operate in the future. It demonstrated that success required more than running a solid business. You had to know how to lobby, how to influence politics and law. Even today, we see Jay Gould's shadow in how major corporations operate. They spend billions on lobbying political contributions and hiring top lawyers to hunt for loopholes or to shape new regulations in their favor. They don't just follow the law, they help create it. The lesson from the Erie War is a reminder that power doesn't lie solely in vaults of money. It lies in the mind, in boldness, and in the ability to adapt or even bend the rules of the game. Gould proved that in a world where everyone competes under the old rules, the one who dares to break or rewrite those rules becomes the ultimate winner. And there you have it, a story not just about money, but about power cunning and the reshaping of an entire economy. Jay Gould once again proved himself ahead of his time, even if in ways many people condemn. In the next chapter, we'll continue following Jay Gould's journey as he consolidates his power and plunges into even bolder ventures. What do you think of Gould's tactics? Was he a genius or a ruthless villain? Let me know in the comments below if in the previous chapters we explored the bold first moves, the lightning-fast railroad deals, and the way Jay Gould gradually proved himself to be a wizard on Wall Street. Then today we're diving into one of the darkest and most shocking chapters of his career, and also one of the biggest financial scandals in American history. This is Chapter 4, the Black Friday Scandal. Picture this. It was the post-Civil War era, a chaotic yet opportunity-filled period. The economy was rebuilding, and gold played an absolutely crucial role. Unlike the paper greenbacks issued by the government to fund the war, gold was real asset value, a stable measure constantly fluctuating on the free market. Every major international transaction, every large loan was denominated in gold. Whoever controlled gold could manipulate the entire economy. The bold plan, Gould and Fisk. In 1869, Jay Gould, the cold, calculating mastermind, and Jim Fisk, the flamboyant, reckless showman partners already notorious for railroad schemes, spotted a golden opportunity in the most literal sense. Their plan, simple yet insane, corner the gold market of the entire nation. Sounds unbelievable, right? But to Gould, nothing was impossible. His logic went like this. If they could buy up enough gold to create artificial scarcity, the price would skyrocket. And if they could hold that price long enough, they'd become the richest men in America overnight. But Gould went even further. He argued that keeping gold prices high and stable would actually benefit American agricultural exporters by making U.S. goods more competitive overseas. Sounds noble, doesn't it? In reality, it was a perfect cover for a massive personal enrichment scheme. For this plan to work, they needed something more important than money silence, or more specifically, passive cooperation from the government. They needed President Ulysses S. Grant and the Treasury not to sell gold from Federal Reserves. Because if the government dumped gold onto the market, it would instantly increase supply collapse prices and destroy everything Gould and Fisk were trying to do. And this is where Gould displayed his mastery of human manipulation. He and Fisk approached President Grant through his brother-in-law, Abel Corbin, a man easily influenced and politically naive. They surrounded Grant with lavish parties, expensive gifts, and persuasive conversation. Gould subtly planted in Grant's mind the idea that withholding gold would stabilize the economy, raise crop prices, and benefit the nation. Amazingly, Grant, an incredible general but inexperienced in politics and finance, was convinced. He believed keeping gold in the Treasury was the right thing. With this unspoken assurance that the government wouldn't interfere, Gould and Fisk launched a frenzied gold-buying campaign. They used every trick in the book, from massive borrowing to buying through multiple brokers, to hide the scale of what they were doing. The market collapse and catastrophic fallout. Tension began to rise. Gold prices soared at a breakneck pace, and Wall Street turned into a pressure cooker. Big players grew nervous. Small investors panicked, unsure whether to buy or sell. All eyes turned to Gould and Fisk's office, where rumors swirled that they were hoarding millions of dollars in gold. But every plan has a weak point. Although Grant was initially convinced, his wife and several trusted confidants began to sense danger, and pressure around the president intensified. They warned him about the obvious manipulation and the potential economic disaster. Grant eventually realized he'd been used. And then, on September 24, 1869, a day now etched into history as Black Friday, President Grant made a game-changing decision. The government would sell gold. The news ripped through Wall Street like a lightning bolt. A shockwave hit the entire market. Instantly, gold prices plunged uncontrollably. From dizzying highs, the price crashed within minutes. Shouts, panic, and chaotic sell orders echoed across the trading floors. Brokers tore at their hair faces, pale with dread. They knew the game was over. Hundreds of small investors and brokers went bankrupt within minutes. Companies collapsed, fortunes evaporated, and confidence in the market was violently shaken. It was a financial tsunami, sweeping away everything in its path. How Gould escaped almost unscathed, and the lesson of systemic risk. The aftermath was devastating. The entire nation was shaken. Congressional investigations were launched. Outraged citizens demanded justice. Jim Fisk, brash and less cunning than Gould, faced countless lawsuits and public condemnation. And Jay Gould, here's the astonishing part. With extraordinary cunning, Gould had already begun secretly unloading his gold positions even before Grant's decision was publicly announced. He either sensed danger or received inside information earlier than everyone else. When the market collapsed, he avoided the worst of the losses and even profited from certain short positions. Even more, he weaponized his legal and political manipulation skills. He had top-tier lawyers, underground connections, and most importantly, at the time, no laws explicitly criminalized the manipulation of the gold market. He argued he was merely trying to stabilize the market and help the economy, shifting blame onto his partners. Once again, Gould escaped spectacularly. He dodged most criminal charges and faced only minor civil lawsuits, trivial compared to the scale of the scandal. It exposed massive weaknesses in financial regulation and the legal system at the time. The systemic risk lesson. The Black Friday scandal was a painful lesson in systemic risk. The idea that the collapse of one part of a system can threaten the entire structure. In this case, manipulating a critical market like gold could have plunged the entire economy into a deep crisis if the government hadn't intervened. It was also a chilling reminder of the power and danger of unchecked greed, and how a single brilliant but unethical individual could cause enormous damage. Jay Gould wasn't just a tycoon. He was a magician, a manipulator, a survivor, always slipping through the cracks of law and morality to achieve his goals. Even today, systemic risk sits at the center of debates about financial regulation. We still ask ourselves, how do we stop the Jay Goulds of the 21st century? Black Friday is a scar in American financial history. But for Jay Gould, it was merely another chapter in his stormy life and daring schemes. He weathered the storm and even emerged stronger. But that was only the beginning. The road ahead for Jay Gould would be filled with power struggles, brutal takeovers, and the construction or destruction of a massive railroad empire. Welcome back to our ongoing journey through the turbulent life of Jay Gould and the man we've watched dive headfirst into some of the most brutal railroad wars Wall Street had ever seen. If the previous chapter was a story of schemes, market manipulation, and notorious financial battles, then this chapter marks a staggering turning point. You might think that after such fierce conflicts, after all the curses hurled at him by the public and the press, Gould would step back, reflect, and live a quieter life. A huge mistake. That was only the prelude. Gould was never satisfied with small skirmishes. His mind always aimed at something bigger, grander, building a true empire. And that's exactly the theme of today's Chapter 5, Expanding the Railroad and Telegraph Empire. Gould's goal was no longer just to profit from market fluctuations, but to leave behind something physical, a massive industrial legacy. The buy cheap, sell high strategy and restructuring struggling companies. All right, hearing buy cheap, sell high. You might immediately think of a typical speculator, right? But Gould's strategy at this stage was far more complex and far more profound. He didn't just buy low and sell high. Gould had an extraordinary eye for seeing through the messy surface of distressed assets. He searched for undervalued properties, struggling companies on the brink of bankruptcy, especially small, inefficient, or fragmented railroad lines that were pieces of a much bigger, untapped network. While other investors saw risk, inefficiency, and losses, Gould saw unrealized potential value buried beneath years of neglect and mismanagement. The key point is this. Gould didn't just see current value, he saw the capacity to create new value. After acquiring these companies for dirt-cheap prices, sometimes by buying outright, sometimes by quietly accumulating controlling shares, he didn't immediately flip them for profit. Instead, Gould launched aggressive, sometimes ruthless restructurings. He enforced strict management discipline, slashed costs mercilessly, fired unnecessary staff, optimized operations, upgraded infrastructure when needed, and merged smaller lines into larger, more efficient systems. He turned ugly ducklings into swans, but not out of love for beauty, only for profit. Once these companies became profitable or turned into essential pieces of a greater network, their value skyrocketed. At that point, Gould could sell them for massive gains or keep them to reinforce his empire. It was a brilliant strategy, turning the junk of the market into money-making machines. Gould's vision for a unified national transportation and communication system. If Gould's antics in earlier chapters made him look like a railroad thief, it was in this period that we start to see a grander vision. a true architect of infrastructure. Imagine the vast United States in the late 19th century. Railroads were booming but still fragmented, each company running its own way with no unified standards. Goods had to be transferred across multiple lines, wasting time and money. Communication was just as inefficient. Telegrams passing through different companies made the process slow and unreliable. Gould realized that real power lay in integration. He didn't just want to own a railroad, he wanted to own a network. He didn't just want to profit from transporting goods, he wanted to control the flow of goods and information on a national scale. His vision was of a unified, seamless system of transportation and communication across the entire country. A system where his railroads connected industrial hubs, major cities, and agricultural regions producing raw materials. A system where information could travel swiftly, cutting through geographic barriers. This was a vision far ahead of its time. While many competitors were busy with local routes or petty rivalries, Gould saw the bigger picture, a connected nation, where speed and efficiency determined prosperity. He believed that whoever controlled this network would control the future of the American economy, and he intended to be that person. The battle for Western Union and the critical power of controlling information. To turn this vision into reality, Gould knew he needed more than railroads. He needed communication. If railroads were the bloodstream of the economy, telegraphs were the nervous system. At that time, Western Union was the undisputed giant of telegraphy. Its vast network of cables connected nearly every important city and town in America. Controlling Western Union wasn't just controlling a company, it meant controlling the flow of information, market, news, business updates, even political messages. For a speculator, an empire builder like Gould, getting information before others was a golden key. It could determine the success or failure of a deal, or an entire corporate takeover. Imagine knowing ahead of time that a stock price would rise or fall, or that a new railroad line was about to be built, or that a major business agreement was coming. That's nearly limitless power. And so another war erupted, no less dramatic than the Erie Railroad War. Jay Gould plunged into the Western Union takeover with every ounce of cunning and determination he possessed. His opponents were heavyweight financiers who understood Western Union's value just as well. Gould didn't hesitate to use every tactic available, secretly accumulating shares through intermediaries, pressuring the board with lawsuits, even spreading information true or not to shake investor confidence and create buying opportunities. He also formed smaller competing telegraph companies, using them to weaken Western Union from the inside, forcing them into concessions or threatening them with endless brutal competition. It was a years-long battle full of drama and unexpected reversals. In the end, as many predicted, with his multi-pronged assaults and near-limitless financial stamina, Jay Gould won. He gained control of Western Union and merged it into his railroad empire. Controlling Western Union not only brought Gould enormous profit, it gave him unmatched power, the power to control information. He could see what was happening across the American economy, send messages as he wished, and even delay or block information from rivals. This was the pinnacle of power for a 19th century tycoon. The transformation from a speculator to an industrial empire builder. And so, from the wreckage of endless battles, Jay Gould rose not with a sword, but with rails and telegraph wires. This was the stage where we saw a different Jay Gould emerge, more mature, or at least operating on a far larger scale with a far deeper vision. From a despised railroad pirate, he was evolving into an architect of modern infrastructure. Don't get it wrong. Gould was still a speculator at heart, still a master manipulator, always chasing profit and power. But his vision had expanded far beyond quick stock flips. He was truly building, merging, and optimizing enormous industrial assets. The railroads he built, the companies he unified, the telegraph system he controlled, they laid the foundation for America's economic growth. His motives may have been selfish, driven by wealth and power, but what he left behind was a more efficient and connected national transportation and communication network. He had seen the future of a connected nation where goods and information flowed fast and efficiently, and he used his talent and his ruthlessness to bring that future to life. This was the transformation from a stock market gambler to a man designing a bigger chessboard with the entire country as his board. He laid the first bricks of a true empire, a physical legacy that would outlast the whispers and scandals of Wall Street. But would all that power and wealth turn him into an enlightened king or just a tyrant with a grander vision? And would these empires built on ruthlessness and ambition endure forever or collapse under their own weight? We'll find out in the next chapter as Jay Gould faces new challenges and perhaps new enemies on his relentless path forward. Welcome back to WealthRise Stories and to our deep dive into the most insane stories of financial titans throughout history. Today we're going into the life of a man whose very name once made the entire nation shiver, Jay Gould. This chapter, we'll call it Chapter 6, The Most Hated Man in America. Sounds dramatic, right? But it's true, few figures in American history were hated as intensely and as universally as Jay Gould, a man known simultaneously as the Wizard of Wall Street and the Devil himself. What makes this even more interesting is that America at the time was full of infamous robber barons: Cornelius Vanderbilt, John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan. All of them amassed gigantic fortunes through methods that were, let's just say, not always clean, and they were constantly criticized. So why among all these sharks did Jay Gould become the face of greed, ruthlessness, and public outrage? It's a great question, because the answer lies not only in what he did, but also in how the public saw him and in who shaped that image. 1. The role of the press and cartoonists, when an image is worth 1,000 words. Picture this post-Civil War America, the era we now call the Gilded Age, a time of explosive economic growth, but also extreme inequality. Newspapers were booming, and more importantly, it was the golden age of political cartoons. And remember, not everyone could read, but everyone could understand a drawing. In that environment, Thomas Nast, the legendary cartoonist for Harper's Weekly, and the man who basically created the modern Santa Claus, turned Jay Gould into a symbol of evil. Nast relentlessly portrayed Gould in grotesque and vicious ways. Gould was drawn as a venomous snake slithering down Wall Street, a massive spider spinning webs across the railroads, or even Satan himself with horns and a devil's tail sucking the lifeblood out of ordinary Americans. Now imagine millions of copies of those images circulating nationwide. How deeply do you think they burrowed into public consciousness? Especially when people were struggling to survive, while the man depicted as a demon kept getting richer and more powerful. These cartoons didn't just criticize Gould, they turned him into a scapegoat for every fear and frustration society carried. They created a Jay Gould who wasn't just ruthless, he became the embodiment of evil, a full-blown villain in America's economic fairy tale. 2. Strikes and Gould's treatment of workers, exploitation and suppression. But it wasn't just imagery. Jay Gould truly did things that infuriated the public. His primary domain was the railroad, and that's where he clashed head-on with the working class. Think back to the Great Railroad Strike of 1877, one of the largest, most violent labor strikes in American history. Gould wasn't the sole cause of the strike, but the way he handled later labor conflicts cemented his cruel reputation. Take the Southwestern Railroad Strike of 1886. When workers demanded better conditions and higher wages, Gould's reaction was brutally uncompromising. He hired private security forces, the notorious Pinkertons, to break the strikes using the harshest tactics available. He was ready to fire thousands of workers and replace them with scabs regardless of their skill or experience. To Gould, laborers were merely part of the cost structure gears in the massive machinery he controlled. Profit came first, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. His cold-blooded willingness to crush working-class families made him a sworn enemy of labor movements and a target of deep public hatred, especially from people who saw themselves reflected in those exploited workers. This created a vicious cycle. The press painted him as a demon, and his actions seemed to prove the caricatures were true. 3. Compared to other tycoons. The glaring absence of philanthropy. This point is crucial in explaining why Gould became the ultimate villain, while others escaped that fate. Look around at his peers. Rockefeller was ruthless, but eventually became one of history's greatest philanthropists, founding universities, medical research centers, the Rockefeller Foundation. Andrew Carnegie crushed labor just as hard, but he believed in the gospel of wealth and built libraries, schools, and Carnegie Hall. Even Cornelius Vanderbilt, a hardened old Commodore, donated a massive sum to establish Vanderbilt University. And Jay Gould, nothing. He showed virtually no interest in philanthropy, public goodwill, or even pretending to care what people thought of him. While others used charity to clean up their reputations, or at least to build great public monuments, Gould cared solely about accumulating and controlling wealth. To him, money was a weapon, a tool to win in the business arena. He had no desire to create a legacy of benevolence. To the public, this made him look shamelessly greedy and utterly devoid of empathy. It reinforced every accusation leveled against him, that he cared only for himself and his ever-growing fortune. 4. His secrecy and mystery, the perfect breeding ground for suspicion. Lastly, Gould's personality played a huge role in how much he was despised. Jay Gould was intensely private, some might say secretive. He avoided the public eye, shunned social gatherings, and rarely spoke to the press. He didn't give interviews. He didn't defend himself. He didn't try to explain his actions or correct misunderstandings. While other tycoons occasionally appeared in newspapers or made public gestures of goodwill, Gould stayed silent. He lived internally, only showing his energy in the arena of finance, where he orchestrated complex deals and fought brutal Wall Street wars. Even at the height of public outrage, he never bothered to speak up. And you know how people are when information is missing. They fill the gaps with their imagination. When a powerful, wealthy man refuses to show himself, the public assumes the worst. Gould's silence didn't just make him mysterious. It made him suspicious, a man who surely had something monstrous to hide. Compared to Rockefeller or Carnegie, who at least looked more relatable or visible, Gould felt like a phantom haunting Wall Street, pulling strings from the shadows. This amplified public fear and made Nast's demonic drawings all the more believable. So there you have it. Jay Gould wasn't hated only for his ruthless actions, because he certainly wasn't the only ruthless tycoon of his era. He was hated and became the ultimate symbol of greed, because of a unique combination. First, the explosive power of media and political cartoons, especially in an era when images shaped public opinion far more than words. Second, his unforgiving, often brutal treatment of workers, which struck at the heart of the common American experience. Third, his complete lack of philanthropy or goodwill, leaving him no moral escape hatch with the public. And finally, his secretive, aloof personality, which allowed people to project their darkest fears onto him. Jay Gould's legacy is a powerful reminder of public perception, how what you do and how you're seen can define your place in history in very different ways. Thank you for listening. In the next chapter, we'll explore one of Jay Gould's most legendary battles and how he reshaped the rules of Wall Street itself. See you there. If If in the previous chapters we witnessed his bold maneuvers and brutal battles, then today, in Chapter 7, Philosophy of Life and Business, we're diving into the most important part of all, the mindset of a genius or an opportunist, depending on how you look at it. What truly guided Jay Gould's decisions, both in business and in his personal life? What core principles shaped the man and the empire he built? I believe it wasn't just innate talent, but a system of philosophy forged through setbacks, triumphs, and failures that turned Jay Gould into a force no one could afford to ignore. Let's turn the pages of his personal philosophy notebook, one principle at a time. 1. The principle of do your own work. Independence and trusting no one completely. The first and perhaps the most defining principle of Gould's life was his almost isolating independence. He never placed absolute trust in anyone, not even in his closest partners. From his earliest days, making that Delaware County map, Gould had to fend for himself, learn for himself, fight for himself. And the ruthless environment of Wall Street, where handshakes could break overnight, only strengthened this belief. You know, when we talk about trust in business, we usually highlight how essential it is. But Gould took the opposite route. To him, trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, especially when vast fortunes were at stake. He never expected anyone to stay loyal forever, so he always kept an escape route, a backup plan, or simply refused to show his full hand. Think about it, a man whom his rivals called a lone wolf, or the Wall Street hermit. He didn't have a circle of loyal advisors like many modern billionaires do. He researched on his own, analyzed on his own, and made the final calls on his own. This didn't just make him unpredictable, it protected him from traps, betrayals, and the disasters that swallowed other businessmen whole. It allowed him to act swiftly, unbound by committees or consensus, and adapt his strategy on the fly. Cold, maybe. Negative, perhaps. But in a world full of sharks and unforgiving competition, do your own work wasn't just a business principle, it was a survival strategy. It forced him to take full responsibility for every decision, never blaming or relying on anyone else. To me, it's a reminder that no matter how many partners or advisors you have, the final responsibility is yours, and you must be able to stand on your own 2 feet. 2. The importance of information. He who knows first wins. If independence was Gould's armor, then information was his sharpest sword. Jay Gould understood one thing perfectly in finance. The one who knows first is the one who wins. He didn't just gather information, he hunted for it, dissected it obsessively, and transformed it into undeniable advantage. To Gould, information wasn't just numbers on a financial report. It was inside political gossip, detailed rail route maps, obscure freight flow statistics, whispers in congressional hallways, or even market rumors. He built a vast network of eyes and ears, from politicians to ordinary workers, ensuring he was always the first to see the full picture, even the tiniest pieces of it. Remember his railroad plays. Where others saw dilapidated, unprofitable routes, Gould saw hidden economic lifelines, strategic choke points that once controlled granted monopoly power. He bought struggling railroads not simply because they were cheap, but because he had information that they were future cornerstones of larger networks. He knew about upcoming government projects, demographic shifts, freight demand trends long before anyone else cared. This wasn't luck. It was the result of relentless investment in information and razor-sharp analysis. He who knows first wins wasn't just a quote, it was a doctrine. It teaches us that in today's data-overloaded world, raw information is worthless unless processed, verified, and converted into actionable insight. The ability to filter, interpret, and see the deeper meaning behind information is the key to superior decision-making. 3. Long-term vision. Seeing hidden value where others only see ruin. Though Gould is often labeled a short-term speculator or a corporate thief, One of his strongest principles was actually his extraordinary, long-term vision. He had a rare eye for spotting value in places where everyone else saw nothing but failure, chaos, and collapse. Think back to the railroad crisis of 1873. The panic drove countless rail lines into bankruptcy. Investors fled, dumping shares as if they were toxic. But Gould, he quietly accumulated massive positions in companies like Union Pacific and Missouri Pacific, while their stocks were scraping the bottom. He didn't just see rusted cars and deserted tracks. He saw a future where railroads would become America's economic backbone, linking east and west, carrying goods and people across the continent. This was contrarian thinking at its finest, seeing blue skies behind the storm. Gould invested in the future of a growing nation, in the potential of a revolutionary technology, even as it struggled. He put money into what others threw away, waited patiently, and reaped enormous rewards. For me, this is an invaluable lesson in investing and vision. It's not just about buying things cheaply. It's about understanding why they're cheap and whether they have real long-term intrinsic value waiting to be unlocked. In a modern world obsessed with short-term trends and fleeting bubbles, the ability to hold your ground, recognize true value, and wait is a tremendous power. It lets you turn crises into opportunities and build lasting assets. 4. Silence is golden. He rarely spoke to the press, letting actions speak for him. Finally, a principle just as defining. Jay Gould's belief that silence is golden. While other industrial titans made grand speeches, gave interviews, or defended themselves in newspapers, Gould chose silence. He almost never answered journalists, never justified himself, never tried to spin the narrative. He let his actions do all the talking. This is especially remarkable considering he was one of the most viciously attacked men in the press. He was called a Wall Street devil, a robber, a black wizard. But Gould didn't waste time and energy engaging in verbal battles. Instead, he stayed focused on executing his plans quietly, building his empire, and letting outcomes be his strongest response. His silence wasn't cowardice. It was strategy. It confused his enemies, leaving them unsure of his next move. It protected him from the pitfalls that come with saying too much. And most importantly, it reinforced the belief that a man's worth lies not in what he says, but in what he accomplishes. Today, in the age of social media where everyone wants to comment, defend themselves, and control the narrative, the ability to stay silent and let results speak is a remarkable power. It demands discipline, confidence in your path, and the awareness that actions outweigh words. For Gould, every railroad he built, every profit he generated, every battle he won was a louder response than any public statement could ever be. So there you have it. 4 core principles that shaped Jay Gould's life and business philosophy. Absolute independence, the primacy of information, long-term vision, and the power of silence. Whether you agree with his methods or not, you can't deny that these principles built an empire and made Jay Gould one of the most influential figures in American financial history. He wasn't a saint. He was a master strategist, a man who saw the world through his own lens and relentlessly pursued his vision. Understanding these principles helps us not only understand Jay Gould better, but also reflect on the philosophies that shape success and failure in every era. In the next chapter, we'll explore the legal battles and scandals that followed Jay Gould throughout his life, and how he managed to withstand all that pressure. Don't miss it. Welcome back to our channel. I'm WealthRise Stories, and today we continue our journey into the dramatic life of one of the most controversial figures in American financial history, Jay Gould. In the previous chapters, we immersed ourselves in the brutal battles of Wall Street, those takeover schemes, those bold market manipulations that shaped the infamous image of a cold-blooded, ruthless, and sometimes downright immoral Wizard of Wall Street. We witnessed how he built and destroyed empires, how he accumulated immense wealth through complex deals, and how he became a haunting figure respected and feared in equal measure by an entire generation. But my friends, history and the stories of great individuals rarely have just one side. Behind the curtain of dry numbers, billion-dollar contracts, and sensational headlines, there is always a living, breathing human being with emotions, personal concerns, and private complexities few ever see. And that is exactly what we aim to uncover in Chapter 8. The private life behind the Iron Curtain. Today, we will open the door to Jay Gould's private world, a world he guarded fiercely, almost completely separated from the chaos and savagery of the stock market. We'll discover the Jay Gould behind the deals, a husband, a father, a man with intense interests, quiet fears, and human layers that made him far more than the monster the public imagined. Could a man capable of crushing opponents in business really be a gentle father, a devoted husband? Could a notorious tycoon truly find peace in tending to flowers? Let's peel back that Iron Curtain together and find out. 1. Jay Gould, the husband, the father. When you think of Jay Gould, then the first image that comes to mind is probably a stern face, cold, sharp eyes, and a mind that never stops calculating. But when he stepped through the door of his home at 471 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, or later the vast Lyndhurst estate in Tarrytown, New York, a completely different Jay Gould appeared. The stern, icy figure dissolved, replaced by a true family man. Contrary to his harsh and mysterious exterior, Jay Gould's family life was remarkably stable and happy, a stunning contrast to the constant storms of his career. In 1863, he married Helen Miller Gould, a woman from a modest family in New York State. Their marriage lasted nearly 30 years until Helen's death in 1892, just a few months before Jay Gould himself passed away. Their relationship wasn't just romantic. It was deeply supportive and understanding. Helen wasn't only a wife, she was a companion, a spiritual partner, someone who brought peace and balance into Gould's life. She was the place where he found comfort, someone with whom he could share burdens and an escape from the suffocating pressure of the financial world. In a world full of deceit and betrayal, Helen was a rock, an unwavering source of positivity and trust. They had 6 children. George Edwin, Helen, Anna Frank, and Howard, and Jay Gould was a devoted father. He not only provided a wealthy life, but also spent meaningful time nurturing, teaching, and guiding them. The image of this legendary tycoon sitting down to read to his children or playing with them in the garden surprises many. He encouraged them to study, develop personal interests, and he emphasized moral values, honesty, and kindness. There are even anecdotes that Gould personally taught his children to operate the giant model trains he built on the estate grounds. This didn't just show his affection, it reflected his desire to teach practical knowledge and life skills. He wanted his children not just to inherit wealth, but to inherit the ability and character to lead their own lives. His love for his family proves that Jay Gould wasn't just a money-making machine. He had a warm heart capable of love and appreciation for life's deepest values. Family was his sanctuary, his true peace and joy. 2. A green paradise. His passion for plants and enormous greenhouses. If family was the place of peace, then his love for plants was a separate world he built with his own hands, a world entirely detached from Wall Street's relentless battles. And this may be the most unexpected side of him. The infamous tycoon was deeply, passionately in love with botany. At Lyndhurst, a magnificent Gothic revival estate known as the Gothic Castle on the Hudson, Jay Gould transformed his gardens into a miniature tropical paradise, a living botanical museum. He spent a fortune building dozens of massive greenhouses, equipped with the most advanced technology of the time, capable of recreating ideal environments for thousands of plant species from around the globe. But what truly stands out isn't the scale. It's Gould's personal dedication. He didn't just hire expert gardeners, he participated himself. He spent hours inside the greenhouses each day pruning, watering, and intimately studying his collection. He reportedly knew the scientific names of countless species, rare orchids, exotic palms, strange plants from Africa and Asia, all thriving under his care. For Gould, these greenhouses weren't an expensive hobby. They were a sanctuary, a sacred space where he found calm balance and connection with nature. In the world of flowers and lush leaves, there were no Wall Street sharks, no hostile takeovers, no market crashes. Only life, pure, beautiful, peaceful. His passion for plants was also a form of control. If Wall Street was chaotic and unpredictable, the greenhouse was a world he could perfect nature, responding to his patient care. It was therapy meditation, a space where he could recharge before returning to battle. Imagine the power of such an image, a ruthless tycoon quietly admiring a blooming orchid or gently touching a new leaf. It reveals a deeply layered, profoundly human soul. 3. The silent battle tuberculosis and his obsession with health. But behind the powerful exterior, the elegant hobbies and the loving family life, a shadow haunted Jay Gould for years, a secret he guarded closely: tuberculosis. In the late 19th century, tuberculosis, the White Plague, was one of the deadliest diseases, taking millions of lives, with almost no effective treatment. Gould was diagnosed with it when he was still young, and it became a persistent, silent companion throughout his life. His illness deeply shaped his psychology and lifestyle. Health became an obsession. He was extremely cautious about his environment, diet, and physical activity. He constantly sought the newest therapies, even though medicine was limited. Some stories say he installed an elaborate air filtration system in his home to keep the air as pure as possible. Fear of death, or rather of physical decline, might have pushed him to work with near superhuman intensity. Did he feel he had less time than others, driving him to use every moment to build his legacy and accomplish his ambitions? His awareness of his fragile body may have fueled his iron determination to accumulate wealth and power. And of course, he hid his illness from the public. In the ruthless world of Wall Street, physical weakness was dangerous. It could be used against him. A powerful tycoon couldn't let anyone know he was fighting a deadly disease. So he carried this burden alone, battling silently with only his closest family noticing his gradual decline. This struggle added tragedy and humanity to his life. It reminds us that even the most powerful figures, people who control the fates of millions, cannot escape human frailty. 4. A perfect contrast: the ruthless tycoon and the family man. And there it is, my friends. We've seen the lesser-known pieces of Jay Gould's life. A portrait emerges, one with two faces that seem impossibly opposite. On one side, Jay Gould, the ruthless negotiator, ready to crush opponents, manipulate markets without hesitation, seen by many as the embodiment of greed and moral decay during the Gilded Age. He was the Wizard of Wall Street, the man tied to infamous events like Black Friday and the Erie Railroad War. But on the other side, another Jay Gould appears gentle and loving, with his wife and children devoted to his greenhouses and silently fighting a deadly illness. A father reading stories to his kids, a husband finding peace in family life, a man deeply in love with nature. This contrast isn't a contradiction, it's a powerful reminder of human complexity. Jay Gould's life shows us that people are rarely one-dimensional. Opposing traits can coexist, even reinforce one another. Perhaps the crushing pressure of the financial world made family and nature all the more precious to him. Perhaps the shadow of illness pushed him to build a legacy that extended beyond his own lifespan. By looking behind the Iron Curtain, we understand not only Jay Gould, but the complexity of human nature itself. Great stories are always stories of complex people with both light and shadow strength and fragility. Jay Gould was undeniably one of them, and his story isn't over yet. We've seen how he built empires and who he was behind the scenes. In the next chapter, we'll explore the final years of the Wizard of Wall Street, the legacy he left behind, and the lasting impact he had on an entire nation. If you found this story fascinating and want to explore more hidden corners of history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss what's coming next. And drop a comment below. What do you think of Jay Gould? A ruthless tycoon or a devoted family man? I hope you're ready for another chapter in our journey into the world of Jay Gould, the man famously known as the Wizard of Wall Street. We've gone through his ups and downs together, the bold schemes, the cunning strategies, the ruthless moves. Today we're not diving into any specific event. Instead, we're taking a step back to look at the bigger picture, the legacy Jay Gould left behind. And that is the title of today's chapter, Chapter 9, A Two-Sided Legacy. Perhaps no figure in American business history has sparked as much controversy as Jay Gould. He was a giant, one of the most influential industrialists of his time, a man who left an undeniable mark on the economic and social landscape of the United States. But that mark isn't painted only with the bright colors of progress. It also carries the dark stains of greed and moral compromise. Let's dissect that complicated legacy together. 1. The immense fortune and what happened to it. First, we can't avoid mentioning the massive fortune Jay Gould accumulated. When he died in 1892, his estate was estimated at around $72 million. That number might not sound extreme by today's standards, but remember, this was 1892. To put it in perspective, that would translate into several billions of dollars today, perhaps even more, depending on how you calculate it. It was a staggering fortune, placing him among the richest people in American history. So what happened to all that wealth? Gould had 6 children, and they inherited nearly everything. And unlike many rags to riches to ruin stories where the next generation squanders the family fortune, the Gould family is something of an exception. His eldest son, George J. Gould, took over many of his father's business interests, especially the railroad empire. He tried to maintain and even expand the family's influence, though he didn't always match his father's legendary success. The other children were well educated, lived lavishly, and still managed to keep significant portions of the wealth. However, as with every financial empire, prosperity doesn't last forever. The major economic upheavals of the 20th century, especially the Great Depression and the gradual decline of the railroad industry, slowly eroded the Gould family's wealth and influence. Even so, the material legacy Jay Gould left behind remains undeniable proof of his extraordinary talent for accumulating riches. 2. The positive impact. A nation built on rails and telegraph lines. But Gould's legacy isn't just numbers in a bank ledger. Let's look at the positive side, something that's often overlooked. When the conversation fixates on his scandals, Jay Gould was a builder. We're talking about post-Civil War America, a nation sprinting through industrialization and expansion. Railroads were the backbone of that economy. They're the arteries that connected cities, transported goods from coast to coast, and carried people to new opportunities. And Gould, despite his controversial methods, consolidated, expanded, and reorganized thousands of miles of track. He took fragmented pieces and forged them into a more unified, efficient network. Just imagine it: agricultural goods from the Midwest suddenly able to reach the markets of New York. Coal from Pennsylvania powering factories all across the country. These aren't small things. They fueled commerce, created jobs, birthed new towns, and played a vital role in modernizing the United States. And it wasn't just railroads. Gould had enormous influence over Western Union, the leading telegraph company of the era. Before the internet existed, the telegraph was the fastest way to transmit information, financial news, business deals, political updates. Gould saw its strategic value early and strengthened Western Union's dominance, turning it into a communications empire. To be fair, Gould didn't invent locomotives or the telegraph. But he had the vision to see their potential and the ruthless determination to turn that potential into the operational backbone of a modern nation. That vision, that ability to turn ideas into reality on a massive scale, was one of his undeniable strengths. 3. The negative impact, a man who eroded public trust. However, as the title of this chapter suggests, Gould's legacy also has a much darker side. He is remembered as one of the most notorious robber barons, a living symbol of the dark underbelly of unregulated capitalism. Think back to the 1869 gold market manipulation or the Erie Railroad War with all its dirty tricks. Gould wasn't the slightest bit hesitant to use any tactic, from manipulating stock prices to issuing fraudulent shares to outright greasing the political system with cash. He bribed lawmakers, judges, even state governors to secure laws and rulings favorable to his interests. This severely eroded public trust in both the free market and the government itself. Farmers in the western states were squeezed by the predatory freight rates set by Gould's railroads. Small investors were wiped out by his manipulative schemes. People felt crushed under the heel of wealthy giants with unchecked power. Skepticism toward laissez-faire markets and doubt about the government's ability or willingness to protect citizens began to spread, thanks to actions like Gould's. He became one of the key figures who triggered reform movements, antitrust laws, and increased government regulation at the turn of the century. That legacy is a scar on trust, on ethics, that still echoes today. 4. The lingering question: builder or destroyer? So, what was Jay Gould, a great builder who helped modernize America, or a destructive force who corrupted systems and fueled public distrust? Historians have debated this for decades, and there may never be a single simple answer. If you focus on what he built: railroads stretching across the continent, a sturdy communication system, you see a visionary architect who helped transform America from an agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. He saw the future and wasn't afraid to pursue it. But if you focus on how he built it with ruthlessness, moral flexibility, and a willingness to bend or break the law, you see a destroyer, a symbol of unrestrained greed, who shattered trust and inflicted real harm. Gould was neither a saint nor a pure villain. He was a product of his era, an era of explosive growth, loose regulations, and a culture that often valued wealth accumulation more than the means used to achieve it. Perhaps his true legacy is this: a reminder that progress and development can come with a cost, that innovation and efficiency sometimes coexist with ethical decay and social harm. Jay Gould's legacy is a powerful symbol of the complexity of progress, of the blurry line between genius and immorality. On one hand, the systems he helped build remain foundational to America's growth. On the other, the damage he caused to public trust and morality still shapes how we think about wealth, power, and the role of government in regulating markets. Even today, as we debate the power of tech giants and the meteoric wealth of a handful of individuals, we're still wrestling with the same questions Jay Gould posed nearly 150 years ago. His story isn't just history, it's a mirror reflecting the core issues of capitalism, a story we are still writing. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. See you in the final chapter, where we'll wrap up the extraordinary life of Jay Gould and extract the final lessons he left behind. We've gone through page after page of bold deals, brutal battles, and the hidden corners of his personality. Now, in this chapter 10, we're going to set aside the historical storytelling for a moment and break down the legacy of Jay Gould, not to judge him, but to uncover timeless lessons, principles that still hold their value today, perhaps even sharper in this turbulent 21st century. The 19th century and the 21st century may sound worlds apart, right? But I believe that beneath all the new technologies, the fast-changing trends, and the modern noise, the core of business finance and personal development still shares the same underlying threads. Jay Gould, controversial as he was a master at spotting opportunities, manipulating markets, and building an empire. So what can we learn from this wizard? 1. The lesson about the importance of going against the crowd. Contrarian thinking. Jay Gould was never someone who followed the crowd. He was a pioneer, a rebel in the way he thought. When everyone was obsessing over speculative bubbles in a trendy sector, he quietly focused on undervalued assets, forgotten industries. When railroads were the thing, he bought them when they were struggling, when prices were dirt cheap, and then restructured them into money-making machines. He saw hidden value where others, blinded by fear or prejudice, saw nothing but failure. In the 21st century, this lesson is even more crucial. We live in an age where information spreads at lightning speed, creating massive FOMO waves, pushing stock prices, cryptocurrencies, and even cultural trends to absurd heights. If you simply follow the crowd, chances are you're buying at the peak and selling at the bottom. Look at the most successful investors today, from Warren Buffett to major hedge funds. They all share one trait: the ability to think independently. They're willing to challenge what everyone else believes is obvious. Seek out alternative perspectives and analyze deeper instead of following herd instincts. For individuals, this means developing critical thinking. Don't rush to trust what's gone viral online or guaranteed tips from non-experts. Research on your own, ask questions, form your own viewpoint. Going against the crowd doesn't mean mindlessly doing the opposite. It means having the courage and knowledge to make decisions based on objective analysis, even when few people agree with you. Sometimes loneliness on the less traveled path is exactly what leads to the greatest opportunities. 2. The power of capturing and controlling information in the digital age. Jay Gould was a master of information. He not only gathered market intel and competitor data, he controlled the flow of information to serve his goals. He used newspapers, telegraphs, and his network to spread rumors, stir up fear, or build confidence, manipulating stock prices and shaping public perception. He understood that, in his world, information was the ultimate weapon, a tool that created an unbreakable competitive edge. In the 21st century, we live in an era of information explosion. Data is considered the new oil. Google, Facebook, Amazon, and countless tech giants built their empires on the ability to collect, analyze, and control data. Our access to information is limitless, but that also brings a new challenge. How do we separate truth from noise? Value from distraction? Gould's lesson is, this raw information alone is not power. Power lies in the ability to filter, analyze, synthesize, and control that information. For businesses, this means investing in big data analytics, AI, and other tools to understand customers' markets and trends. It also means building smart communication strategies, controlling brand image, and responding quickly to PR crises. For individuals, we must become smarter consumers of information. Learn to verify sources, avoid spreading unverified claims, and use information to create value, whether through new skills learned online, market analysis, or the ability to connect scattered ideas into a coherent picture. Jay Gould used telegraphs. Today we have the internet, social media, and AI. The power of information has been amplified 1,000-fold, and mastering it remains the key to success. 3. A warning about the thin line between ambition and ethical destruction. No one can deny that Jay Gould had extraordinary ambition. He wanted wealth, he wanted power, and he achieved both. But the way he achieved them often came at a moral cost, through ruthless strategies, notorious market manipulations, and even making money off the ruin of others. His robber baron label wasn't undeserved. The line between ambition and ethical collapse is razor thin. In the 21st century, questions about business ethics, corporate social responsibility, CSR, and personal integrity are more critical than ever. We've seen financial scandal startups burning money for growth at any cost, and individuals willing to deceive to gain advantage. Ambition itself isn't bad, it drives innovation and greatness. But when ambition becomes blind, when personal gain overrides fundamental morals, ambition becomes a double-edged sword. Jay Gould's story is a harsh reminder. A reputation built with money can evaporate without integrity. Immoral actions may bring short-term profit, but in the long run, they erode trust, destroy credibility, and can lead to downfall. Always ask yourself, what price am I willing to pay to achieve this? Where is your line? Money can buy many things, but not a peaceful conscience, not genuine respect. Ultimately, the core values you uphold define who you are and sustain your career far more than any short-term gain. 4. A reflection on building a true legacy, wealth, or values. When Jay Gould died, he left behind a massive fortune, making his family one of the wealthiest in America. Financially, his legacy was undeniable. But socially, on a human level, his legacy is viewed very differently. He's remembered as a ruthless financial genius, a symbol of the robber baron era. Few praise him for charity, humanity, or positive social contributions. This brings us to a deeper question. What is a real legacy? Is it the money you leave behind, the properties you own? Or is it the values you've inspired, the positive change you've created, the lives you've touched? In the 21st century, where material wealth is seen by many as the ultimate goal, this lesson from Jay Gould is more meaningful than ever. Many modern millionaires and billionaires aren't just building wealth. They're dedicating time and fortune to solving social and environmental problems or advancing science for the greater good. They understand that the true value of a life isn't just the number in a bank account. It's the impact you leave on the world. Think about it. When you look back on your life someday, how do you want to be remembered? As the richest person in the room? Or as the most inspiring, the most impactful? Legacy is not a selfish act. It's deeply meaningful. It's about creating something bigger than yourself, something that continues to create value long after you're gone. Jay Gould is a complex mirror. He is proof of the power of intelligence, ambition, and extraordinary adaptability. But he's also a reminder of the price we pay when ethics and compassion are abandoned. I hope these lessons from the Wizard of Wall Street not only give you a deeper understanding of history, but also offer new perspectives to guide your own path in this 21st century, full of challenges and opportunities. Which path will you choose? What will you learn from the masters of the past to build a better, brighter future for yourself and for the world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think about these lessons. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss the exciting content coming next. See you all in the next chapters. I hope you're ready for a thought-provoking and exciting mental journey. Today we're diving into one of the most controversial figures in American financial history, Jay Gould, the Wizard of Wall Street. A nickname that both celebrates his extraordinary brilliance and hints at the less-than-clean tactics he was known for. Sounds a little cold-blooded and ruthless, doesn't it? But don't get it twisted. Our goal here is not to glorify or encourage any unethical behavior. On the contrary, I believe that even in the most complicated stories, there are valuable lessons we can extract. And with Jay Gould, no matter what history says about him, it's undeniable that he possessed strategic thinking, long-term vision, and extraordinary patience. These are the qualities we want to examine and apply ethically and constructively to our own lives. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to turn the tough lessons from a strategic genius like Gould into something practical and easy for you to apply. And that's how the idea for the 7-day action plan, Think Like Gould, the Ethical Edition, was born. This is a challenge and invitation for you to join me in experiencing and developing your own personal strategic mindset. Are you ready? Grab a notebook and a pen or open your notes app. We're starting right now. DEI 1-2. Identify your own Erie Railroad. When Jay Gould looked at the Erie Railroad in the 1860s, it was a mess. Poorly run, drowning in debt, and seemingly hopeless. But Gould saw hidden potential, a rough diamond waiting to be polished. And he turned it into a powerful weapon in his empire. The lesson for us: in each of our lives, there exists a potential Erie Railroad, a field, a project, a skill, or even a personal or professional area that's undervalued, neglected, or problematic right now, but holds massive potential if improved the right way. Your actions for these 2 days: 1. List them out. Spend time identifying at least 3-5 potential Erie Railroads in your life. These could be a skill you've always wanted to develop, but never committed to learning a new language; basic coding, public speaking; a personal or career project you started, but abandoned; a book; you want to write a YouTube channel; you want to launch a side product and you want to create; a personal area you know is weak, but could change everything if improved: financial management, fitness habits, time management. 2. Deep analysis. Choose one Erie Railroad that has the highest potential impact and is the easiest to start with. Don't be overly ambitious on day 1. Ask yourself, what's holding it back? What are the core issues? Why hasn't it flourished yet? Lack of knowledge, lack of time, lack of motivation, fear of failure. 3. Draft initial improvement ideas. Write down at least 3 specific, even tiny ideas to start improving this Erie Railroad. They don't have to be perfect. Example: if your Erie Railroad is public speaking, your 3 ideas might be: find a free online course, read a book on public speaking, or ask a friend to record you talking so you can review it. I firmly believe that every one of us has a hidden Erie waiting to be discovered and transformed. This is the first step towards seeing opportunity where others only see problems. Day 3-4. Build your own information network. Jay Gould was a master at gathering information. He didn't just read financial statements. He had his people everywhere, from trading floors to political backrooms, helping him know what was happening or about to happen before anyone else. That's how he made bold, accurate decisions. The lesson for us: information is power. In a modern world overflowing with information, quality information is incredibly valuable. To make smart decisions and seize opportunities, we must actively build our own information network, not to manipulate, but to better understand the field we're playing in. Your actions for these 2 days: 1. Identify high-quality sources based on the Erie Railroad you chose or any field you want to grow, and identify at least 3 to 5 top-tier, trustworthy, in-depth information sources. Experts, mentors, or experienced professionals on LinkedIn industry forums, reputable YouTube channels, books, industry journals, reliable research reports, podcasts, webinars, online conferences. Avoid sensational clickbait news. We want truth, not noise. 2. Ask strategic questions. Based on your Erie Railroad, write down 3 strategic questions you want answers to. These must go deeper than the basics, into trends, challenges, and future opportunities. Example: if your Erie Railroad is building a new digital marketing skill, which marketing trends will dominate the next 3-5 years? What tools are reshaping the industry? How do I measure effectiveness correctly now? 3. Start connecting and searching. Spend 1 to 2 hours reading, listening, or watching content from the sources you identified. If possible, reach out to 1-2 knowledgeable people in the field. Not to ask for favors, but to learn. Ask thoughtful questions and build relationships through email, LinkedIn, or networking events. Start with genuine curiosity and respect. Remember, a great strategist never acts in the darkness of ignorance. They illuminate their path with quality intel. Day 5. Long-term planning like a chess grandmaster. Jay Gould was known for seeing far ahead, calculating moves long before his rivals even realized a game was underway. He didn't just live in the present. He constantly placed himself in the future to map out scenarios. The lesson for us: daily life distracts us with small tasks, causing us to lose sight of the bigger picture. Long-term planning gives us direction, purpose, and the resilience to navigate change. Your actions for today: 1. Set an ambitious 5-year goal, return to your eerie railroad, or another major life goal. Imagine how you want it to look in 5 years. Think boldly, don't hold back. Example: in 5 years, I want my public speaking skills to be strong enough that I can confidently speak to 500 people, inspire them, and get paid for it. Or in 5 years, my YouTube side project will have 100,000 subscribers and generate sustainable passive income. 2. Reverse engineer from the future. This is powerful. Instead of thinking forward from now, imagine you've already achieved your 5-year goal. Now look backward. To reach it in year 5, what must happen in year 4? To reach year 4, what must happen in year 3? Continue until year 1, then the next 6 months, 3 months, and the next month. Write down these milestones. 3. Identify 3 major obstacles. Think of the 3 biggest barriers you might face in reaching your 5-year goal. Example: lack of funds, intense competition; lack of time, loss of motivation; rapid tech changes. Long-term planning isn't about forcing life into a rigid path. It's about creating a compass that keeps you oriented no matter what happens. Day 6-7. Practice Gould's power of silence. Jay Gould was famously quiet, secretive, almost emotionless. He listened more than he talked, observed more than he acted. He stayed silent, gathered information, and only moved when the path to victory was clear. His silence was a weapon. The lesson for us: in today's noisy world, we're pressured to speak, to react, to offer opinions, to move fast. But sometimes, real power lies in silence, in deep listening, keen observation, and waiting for the right moment. This is about patience, maturity, and making decisions based on clarity, not impulse. Your actions for these 2 days: 1. Practice still observation. Spend 15 to 30 minutes each day, or whenever possible, in a cafe, on public transport, at work, just observing. Observe everything: people's body language, how they interact, the small details you usually miss. Observe your own thoughts and emotions without judging them. The goal is to sharpen perception and attention. 2. Active listening. In conversations, meetings, or interactions, listen twice as much. Instead of planning your next line, truly try to understand what the other person is conveying, both verbally and implied. Avoid interruptions. Ask clarifying questions instead of making quick judgments. The goal is to gather complete, accurate information. 3. Apply the only act when you have enough information rule. Before making any significant decision, big or small, related to your eerie railroad or not, pause and ask: do I have enough information? If the answer is no, wait. Gather more information. Don't fear delaying a decision that isn't ready. Silence doesn't mean passivity. It means accumulating power so you can act decisively when the moment is ripe. And that is our 7-day action plan, Think Like Gould, the ethical edition. I know the name Jay Gould might feel unsettling at first. But look at what we've extracted: the ability to see undervalued potential, the skill of gathering deep information, the power of long-term strategy, and the strength of patience and observation. These are essential qualities for anyone who wants to succeed ethically in both life and work. This challenge isn't about turning you into a ruthless Jay Gould. It's about helping you become a smarter, more ethical strategist in your own life. Someone who creates value, seizes opportunities, and builds a solid future. Start the 7-day challenge today. I would truly love to hear about your Erie Railroad, the insights you've discovered, the 5-year goals you've set, and how you're practicing silence. Share your thoughts and progress in the comments below. We've just journeyed through a long and dramatic saga with Jay Gould, a man you may love or hate, but whose enormous impact on America's financial and industrial history is impossible to deny. A man full of contradictions, full of ambition, and above all, full of lessons. Now that the curtain has fallen on this story, it's time for us to extract the essence, the most precious gems from that turbulent life. I've thought about this a lot, and I believe there are 3 core lessons, 3 truths behind the numbers and the deals that we people living in the 21st century can still apply to our own lives. These 3 points, I hope, won't just be a summary, but a beam of light guiding the way we view power, reputation, and ambition. Let's dive into each one. The first lesson, and perhaps the one that made me reflect the most while studying Jay Gould, is this: 1. Real power doesn't lie in money, but in controlling information and the systems. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? We often think whoever has the most money has the most power. And yes, money does bring power, no denying that. But Jay Gould shows us something deeper, a subtler and far more durable form of power. Gould wasn't always the richest man on Wall Street. There were times he struggled, borrowed, schemed, and did whatever he had to do to raise capital. But what made him the Wizard of Wall Street wasn't the number in his bank account. It was his extraordinary ability to understand, predict, and manipulate systems. He saw loopholes in the law, weaknesses in the governance structures of railroad companies, cracks in the gold market. More importantly, he understood the value of information. Remember how he exploited the telegraph network, how he had insider knowledge about political negotiations, about his competitors' finances, long before the public ever heard a word. In the Erie War, or the infamous Gold Corner of 1869, Gould wasn't just buying and selling stocks. He was pulling the strings from backstage. He bribed judges, paid off legislators, installed his men in key positions so he could rewrite the rules of the game. He didn't just play the game, he rewrote it. This makes me think a lot about our modern world. In the digital age, information is gold. Who controls the data? Who controls social media platforms, search algorithms? Who sets the standards and rules for emerging industries? Those are the people who hold real power, not just the ones with the biggest bank accounts. Look at today's tech giants. They don't only make money from products, they make money by controlling the flow of information, by shaping how we communicate, how we shop, how we think. They build systems we depend on, and through those systems, they wield unparalleled power. So the lesson here is not go manipulate or bribe people. The lesson is learn to understand power on a deeper level. If you want influence, don't only focus on accumulating wealth. Understand the systems around you. Learn to access and use information intelligently, and if possible, become someone who builds or shapes those systems. That is where true power resides. Lesson 2. The image of a forked road, symbolizing choice. One path leads to an angry crowd, the other to a great monument. Now we arrive at the second lesson, something I believe every one of us, no matter where we are in life, should ask ourselves. Jay Gould is the perfect example of this idea. In his lifetime, he was despised, called a robber baron, a symbol of greed and unethical behavior on Wall Street. Tabloids ran wild with headlines portraying him as a blood-sucking demon, an economic destroyer. That was his reputation, a reputation shaped by the media, by public anger, and by the people who suffered from his actions. And it was overwhelmingly negative. Yet, when we look back, Gould's legacy is far more complicated. Through ruthless and controversial methods, he helped expand America's transcontinental railroad network, developed the telegraph system, and pushed the nation into the industrial age. He was part of the force that transformed America from an agricultural society into an industrial powerhouse. So what was his legacy? The trains running across the rails he built, or the infamy attached to his name? That's a tough question. But what I want to emphasize here is this: reputation is fragile. It's easily manipulated by outside forces beyond our control. Media can distort. Public opinion can be biased. Time can erase, diminish, or exaggerate everything. But legacy is the sum of what you do, the values you leave behind, and the actual impact your life has on this world, whether you're alive or long gone. Legacy isn't just material achievements. It's the influence you have on people, the ideas you plant, the changes you inspire. When I look at Jay Gould, I see a man obsessed with winning, with accumulating. But in that pursuit, he also intentionally or not helped lay the foundation for a nation's development. And that makes me wonder, what are we living for? Are we fixated on building a beautiful reputation in the eyes of others? Or are we pouring our energy into building a meaningful legacy that will outlast us? Reputation and legacy don't always align. A good legacy usually creates a good reputation, but not always. Some people are hated, yet leave monumental legacies. Others are praised, yet leave nothing but an empty shell. The key is our choices. Every action you take today shapes both who you are in the eyes of others, your reputation, and what you will ultimately leave behind, your legacy. How do you want to be remembered? What mark do you want to leave on this world? Think carefully and choose wisely. Lesson 3. The image of a bright sword. One edge leading to a palace, the other to ruins. A symbolic anchor. And finally, the third lesson, a timeless reminder. Whenever we talk about any great historical figure, mention Jay Gould and you can't avoid mentioning ambition. It burned in him like a fire that never went out. It pushed him from a poor, self-taught country boy to the top of Wall Street. Ambition helped him see far ahead, seize opportunities, and rise relentlessly. It fueled the creation of railroad and telegraph empires and contributed to the growth of a nation. But that same ambition, when left unchecked, turned him into someone cold, relentless, willing to crush any moral principle to reach his goals. It made him ignore criticism, curses, even personal relationships. Ambition became an endless hunger, consuming everything in its path, including parts of his own humanity. Was Gould happy? Did he ever find true peace amid all the battles and fortunes? The answer is probably no, or at least not fully. Ambition is a tremendous force. It can light your way, help you overcome hardship, and propel you toward your greatest dreams. It can drive innovation creation and extraordinary contributions to the world. But the same flame, if uncontrolled, if fed with unhealthy fuel, can burn everything down: your relationships, your core values, and ultimately your own soul. So how do we harness ambition without letting it destroy us? I believe the two essential anchors are self-awareness and ethics. Self-awareness is the ability to understand yourself, the true motivation behind your ambition. What are you trying to achieve, and why does it align with your core values? Are you pursuing something that genuinely serves your growth, or are you simply feeding your ego? When you understand yourself, you can channel your ambition into a positive direction. Ethics is like your inner compass. It guides you toward what's right, no matter how difficult the situation gets. Ethics isn't just about obeying the law. It's about integrity, fairness, compassion. With a strong ethical anchor, your ambition stays within healthy boundaries, enabling you to build instead of destroy, connect instead of isolate. We all have ambition. It's part of being human. The issue isn't whether we have it, but how we manage it, how we allow it to shape our lives. Let ambition be a powerful companion, not a ruthless master that leads you to lose yourself. Conclusion: the image of a moon and stars in the night sky. Slow, reflective, gentle, inspiring music. So there you have it. 3 lessons I believe Jay Gould's life, full of shadows and controversy, still offers us. Dear 1. Real power lies in controlling information and systems, not just money. 2. Reputation is defined by others, but legacy is defined by your actions. Choose wisely. 3. Ambition is a double-edged sword. It can build empires or destroy souls. Self-awareness and ethics are your anchors. These lessons aren't just about a distant historical figure. They're principles that still hold true today and will continue shaping our future. My hope is that through Jay Gould's story, you not only understand a deeper part of financial history, but also gain profound reflections about the path you're walking, the values you pursue, and the person you want to become. So we've just taken a deep dive into the turbulent life of Jay Gould, a name that even to this day continues to spark heated debate. A journey not just about finance, but about ethics, ambition, and the hidden corners of human nature. We peeled back the layers from his humble beginnings to the moment he became the Wizard of Wall Street, unafraid to use every trick, every lever of power to build an empire of his own. After everything we've uncovered, the biggest question lingering in your mind might be, was Jay Gould truly a brilliant Wall Street mastermind, armed with sharp vision and a remarkable ability to command the battlefield? Or was he simply a cunning villain, a true robber baron who wouldn't hesitate to break any rule in pursuit of personal gain? Can both exist within the same person? And just how thin was the line between a talented strategist and a ruthless market manipulator in a chaotic era like the 19th century? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts, your unique perspectives, now that you've watched this entire analysis. Leave a comment down below. Is Jay Gould, in your eyes, a genius or a devil? Or is he a complex blend of both, a natural product of the time he lived in? Let's have a thoughtful, civilized discussion together. Every opinion you share is a valuable piece, helping us better understand the multifaceted picture of history and humanity. If you felt this video brought you value, opened up new perspectives on history, finance, and especially the human psychology behind the numbers and the events, if you enjoyed the way we humanize historical figures, exploring their inner depths and motivations, then don't hesitate to hit that like button to support the channel and subscribe right now. Not only does it tell us that you love this kind of content and want more, but it also ensures you won't miss any future deep dives or historical stories told through this unique lens we're preparing. Do you know someone who loves history? Someone fascinated by tales of rise and collapse in financial empires? Or someone who simply enjoys dissecting human psychology across different eras? Someone who constantly questions the line between good and evil, between success and manipulation? Then share this video with them. Your share might spark an interesting conversation, open a new horizon of knowledge for that friend, and connect like-minded souls to our growing community. The power of sharing isn't just in a click, it's in spreading insight and perspective. And speaking of humanized stories, of complex, deeply layered characters, we're always looking for fascinating historical figures to dissect through this unique lens, not just retelling events, but digging into their motivations, fears, desires, and inner contradictions. Who is the hero or villain in history that you've always wanted to understand more deeply? Who is the figure whose life holds profound lessons or philosophies that resonate with our time? Who do you want us to explore next? Write their name in the comments below. The next character featured on this channel, carefully analyzed and truthfully portrayed, might come directly from your suggestion. From the great inventors who changed the world, to ruthless kings who ruled with blood, to pioneering women who broke every barrier, to philosophers who shaped human thought, there are countless stories waiting to be told authentically, without sugarcoating or distortion, purely exploring the human essence in their historical context. Thank you once again for spending your precious time with us on this journey through the life of Jay Gould, one of the most controversial figures in American financial history. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you in the next videos, where we'll continue peeling back the layers of history and humanity. Because the past isn't just a dry book. It's a source of endless inspiration and lifelong lessons. Until then, stay curious. Keep thinking, and remember, behind every number, every event, there is always a human story complex, flawed and endlessly worth exploring. See you next time.